Today we're going to talk about astrology. You're in astronomy, of course, and lots of people often confuse that with astrology. And I'm starting out here just kind of looking at the background of my Prezi, which illustrates nicely some of the confluence between astronomy and astrology. But, and that we have constellations, and some of which are zodiac constellations like Leo and Virgo. Let's dive right in. So we're going to go ahead and start with a question. Did you know that your zodiac sign has changed? Why do I start off there? Well, we'll get to that. It's just an illustration that astrology is not exactly as much of a science as some might think it is. Something we call pseudoscience, masquerades as science. So, astrology has often been a common thing in the news. It was said that Nancy Reagan would consult astrologers, and then, of course, she'd talk to her husband. And so the entire country back in the 80s was thinking that Reagan was essentially getting some of his advice from astrologers through his wife. Now, of course, that's debatable, but astrologers, as you all know, are around, and they're used quite often by people. So astrology has many definitions, but basically it's a type of divination based on the theory that the positions and movements, I shouldn't say theory, based on the hypothesis that the motions and movements of celestial bodies at the time of a person's birth profoundly influence their life. They also claim that astrology can be used to predict events on Earth, such as natural disasters. Now, historically, it was developed thousands of years ago. It's been around for, it's older than astronomy itself. In fact, it used to be what was considered astronomy back in those days by the groups called the ancient Chaldeans and Assyrians. If you've read your Bible, if you read the Bible at all, maybe you don't, but that's okay. That's okay. But if you do, then you've heard of these groups thousands of years ago. And of course, the Babylonians, back in 450 BC, codified what we know as the 12-sign zodiac that we're all familiar with, Capricorn, and so on and so forth. The ancient Greeks really developed the modern forms that are used today, and the expansion of astrology was really checked by the expansion of Christianity, especially after the Middle Ages, so into the Renaissance. Some of the popes really cracked down on astrology. And that was right when astronomy was starting to emerge as a science. So here's the region of the Earth where astrology that we use today was starting to be developed in places like, well, there's ancient Egypt, but ancient Assyria, really, and ancient Babylon, or Babylonia, was in this area as well. You can see the boundaries of these various places, and just a little bas relief of an archer. Later on, it became popular again during the Renaissance, due to the renewed interest in science and astronomy, but Pope Sixtus V basically condemned it and said that anybody who practiced it, it was a sort of a heretical practice. And ironically, though, the birth of astronomy began to really undermine astrology. So at the same time the church was attacking astrology, so were the early scientists, the early astronomers, showing that astrology was not accurate at all. Most astrology these days is something called sun sign astrology. This is where your newspaper horoscopes come from. Basically, the zodiac's divided into 12 signs, named after the constellations that originally fell within a particular zone. And the path of the sun, the moon, and the major planets, also known as the ecliptic, which we'll get to in the next batch of notes, falls right along the zodiac. The zodiac is a series of 12 constellations that run right through the ecliptic. And the positions of the sun, planets, or moon in these constellations at the time of your birth determines your forecast and your personality and predicts natural disasters and all kinds of other things. So if you are a Capricorn, that means the sun was in Capricorn, was in the constellation Capricorn when you were born, like it was for me. Now, this is how it works. This is the 12-sign zodiac. I threw in a better picture of the sun. This is a cooler picture. It's a NASA image. Okay, but if you're a Capricorn, like myself, then you're over here, and the sun, of course, it's actually, during the day, Capricorn is, in the wintertime, Capricorn's out during the day, which means the sun can actually be in Capricorn. You don't actually see Capricorn, but it's in Capricorn. But the winter constellations are things like Taurus and Gemini and Cancer. Okay, so the sun has to be in the constellation, which means that constellation is up during the day. Anyway, there's problems with this. The Earth's equinox and solstice points, the vernal and autumnal equinoxes, the summer-winter solstice, have moved in the last 2,000 years. They're not in the same place that they were back, when this neat little picture was developed. So these aren't in the same locations they were relative to these constellations anymore 3,000 years ago. So your sign would have been different 2,000 years ago. And there should be 13 signs now, not 12. And this is because the Earth's axis actually precesses. That's what it's called. So 2000 BC, Thuban was the North Star. Today, it's Polaris. At some point, it'll be Vega. And then there'll be essentially no bright stars for the North Star until it gets back to being Thuban again. It takes 26,000 years for the Earth's axis to go around that precession circle. And so when astrology was developed, Thuban was the North Star, not Polaris, which means that everything was different. So sun sign astrology today really is very inaccurate astronomically. So this is what your new zodiac configuration should be. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. Feel free to pause this if you want to take a look at it. Now, if you're a real geek like me, this is the geek zodiac. This has nothing to do with reality. I just threw this slide in there for fun. Feel free to pause and take a look and have some fun with it. And if you have time, there's a YouTube video that I've also put in this link that you should watch. It's a news commentator discussing the 13th sign. All right, that's all for astrology. Enjoy the activity today.